Alright, so why am I sharing my failure with you? Well, the thing is, I want to show everyone that we shouldn't be afraid of failing, and we shouldn't be afraid of trying to do things, because if we never try new things, we never learn. So I want to challenge you to show me your failure, and well, let's learn from one another, shall we? Share your failure. Failure isn't dangerous, it's something we should embrace. It's part of life. Hi everyone and welcome to Tessa, The Art of Life. In today's episode, I am going to share my failure with you. And yes, that's going to be interesting because we all fail, don't we? And even artists do. Actually, many times around, because if we didn't fail, we wouldn't learn. Recently, I learned something very interesting that has to do with failure. In our modern society, we tend to look at failure and react to failure as we used to react to life-threatening situations. This is kind of interesting, don't you think? Because that means we fear to fail. And when you think about it, it's kind of true. Most of us do fear to fail. We don't like to show off our failure. So, with that in mind, I'm going to show you just exactly how much I failed this week when I was going to paint some lilacs in watercolors. Now, won't that be fun? Oh yeah, and if you only want to see the tutorial, you jump to this. So here you see the first attempt I did, and I started out quite good with a green background, and then it went just terribly wrong. So I started over and I tried it a bit differently with going the other way around and letting the paint migrate a bit more for the flowers as well. Things were looking quite good until the actual flower part, when it became a fail. Here is my third try. I skipped the green and I only did the blue and purple colors for the flowers. In the end, the flowers didn't turn out as good as I wanted them to, because I got the shadows all wrong. Failure is not to be feared. Didn't fail, we wouldn't grow, so we should actually be grateful that we are failing. Now, when failing, it's important that we not emphasize on the failing part, but that we recognize that we have failed and that we learn from it, because it's the learning that makes us move on, that makes us grow as persons. I'm sure you have done this too, that you have some part of your life that seems to be repeating itself. The same situation, or you meet the same kind of person over and over and over again. And this continues to happen until we learn our lesson, until we have recognized what that is. You can't actually change your behavior, or you can't change the action, or whatever it is, the pattern, because most often it's a pattern that we are doing that makes the situation appear again and again and again. And when we change that, the situation changes. New people come into our lives, new experiences, but not until we change the behavior. And I know that many times these things can seem so hard to do, change our behavior, change a pattern or whatever it may be, and almost like it's impossible. But as Audrey Hepburn said, nothing is impossible. The word itself implies otherwise. I'm possible. That's a very good play with words. So failure actually teaches us to be creative, to find new ways of doing things, to find new way of seeing things.
The first thing I did this time is to tape the edges. I thought I'd try something different this time. I normally don't tape my edges, but it's kind of nice to have those sharp edges once in a while. I pre-mixed some colors here, and the third color that I'm starting with is a light blend of the second one, which is 1/3 of ultramarine and 2/3 of rose matte hue. The first color is a light version of only rose matte hue, and the last color is a blend of 2/5 of Prussian blue and 3/5 of rose matte hue. So in total I'm using only 3 colors in this painting. After my previous mistakes, I thought I'd better scale things down a bit. So I'm starting with the most outer edges of the flowers, with the flower buttons that hasn't really started to bloom yet. And as I move my way further down with where the flowers are in full bloom, with 4 leaves connected, these flowers have their 4 leaves connected in the middle, and that's the tricky part, because they continue down into a trumpet, a form that is not shown in the painting, but you kind of want illusion that it is there anyway, so you need to create a depth. And here I'm adding some extra paint to start to create a bit of a shadow on the flowers. As I come further down this cluster, I'm adding a 3rd row and expanding it a bit. This I do by adding flowers with 3 petals instead of 4, giving the illusion of a cylinder-form shaped flower. In total, I'm making 3 lilacs in this picture. So now that I got my 3 flower stems, I start with the background, and I'm mainly using the last color for this. I start by painting in between the flowers with this color, and I'm also painting around the flowers with some water to get that diffuse effect when the colors migrate on the paper. Now, as I failed before, you can't have too much water on the paper, because then you get a runny effect, and that's not what I want. You just want it to migrate. So not too much water on your paper and you'll be fine. You'll get that perfect bouquet in your picture. Now I get to the tricky part, the darkening of the flowers and the shadows. Here's where things can go really wrong. I start with adding the first color to the buds, and then I add a second layer with 3rd color, but in a more concentrated form. At the center I add some additional paint. I drop some tiny droplets of the 2nd color to add the shadowing. This can be a bit complicated because you don't want to have too much water on the flower when doing this, as I learned the hard way, because then the paint just migrates all over the flower, creating one unanimous dark flower without shading. You want to have just enough water so that the paint migrates, and that you get a practice to get.
Now, as little kids, we learn how to walk, and that's a process. We stand up and we fall, and we stand up and we fall. We continue this process again and again and again until we have learned how to walk. We don't give up. If we did, no one would ever learn how to walk. Why should we do something different when we are learning other things now that we are grown-ups? We only fail if we stop trying. Without failing, there wouldn't be growth. We are all here to learn and to teach one another things.
So that's why I wanted to share this failure with you, because then you can learn from my mistakes. Even though this watercolor painting isn't perfect or nearly at all what I wished it to be, it's far better than where I started out from. So I'm okay with this result, and next will be even better. I went over the flowers once again and darkened the outer part of the flower a bit more with the same color as before. The flowers are a bit darker towards the middle, but then they do have a bit of light in them, and I struggle on how to make these. I've seen many who paint the lilacs with a dark core, and they look really good, but I wanted to have that light part in the middle, so I decided that I was going to add some titanium white diluted with some water at both the middle and at the edges of the flower to get those highlights. Unfortunately, the lighting is terrible here, so you can't really see because the sunlight is pouring in through my window, which is nice, but I forgot to shade, so that means the film is overexposed, and that's why it looks so terrible. I'm so sorry for this. I will do better next time, I promise.
If we don't grow, then we're stuck to exist. It's as simple as that. Well, that's my view on it anyway. Let me know in the comments below what you think about failing. If you feel like it, do share one of your stories and what you've learned from it. Now, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope that you enjoyed it. And if you liked it, give it a thumbs up and maybe even share it. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, and while you're at it, hit a bell. That way you get notified every time I upload a new video, because that's the way YouTube does it these days. Until next time, ciao bellas!